Hi folks, Speedway Tag here. I'd like to show you a little game by Button Shy Games, designed by Gibson, called Arcane Bakery Clash. This is one of the Button Shy titles which doesn't get as much love as I think it deserves, and it might have disappeared a little bit over the years. But if you can, I'll give you my review now. If you can pick up a copy of this, I would recommend it. It's actually a really fun little two-player game. Arcane Bakery Clash. Yeah, not much is spoken about this, so I just want to shine a light on it a little bit this morning or this evening, whatever time of day it is for you. This is a predominantly, well, it's designed first of all as a two-player game. And let me just read the background to it. What's happening here is your two young wizards, apprentice wizards who happen to work in a bakery, well, let me just read it. It's been a long time coming. You and a particular co-worker at the Arcane Bakery simply cannot work together anymore, right? Both of you are apprentice wizards. In a moment of frustration, you challenge them to a duel. After hours, no holds barred. The loser resigns and cleans up the mess. Okay, so no killing, no slaughtering here, just losing your job. Okay, and so that's the theme here. You both work in a bakery. You've got sick of each other, and you're going to use your wizard skills to turn the various items in the bakery, the confectionaries, the cakes, and the other lovely sweets and things into real life weapons and real life creatures to attack your opponent. So this is you against them kind of thing, trying to inflict as much damage as you can on your opponent before they do the same to you. Okay, but and so it is a two-player game. You will first of all take one of the wizard cards, and so that's the one I've chosen, and you put your counter there up to 10, so you can take 10 hits on that card. The other your opponent would take the other wizard, and represented by him, nice little extended, what's his name? Quimby. Yeah. And then you'd go at each other, and whoever gets down to 0 first is the loser. So that's how the two-player game goes. You have a deck of cards here. Button Shy, of course, the games are usually 18 cards. And these are recipes underneath these cards, which you will use to turn into weapons and creatures against your opponent. Really cool little theme, this one. And then you will deal yourself 2 cards as well. And so here's the 2 cards I've got dealt to myself, and then you can see what they look like on the other side. What I love about these recipes, and which are recipes / weapons, of course, that deal damage, the names they've given to these are really, really clever. So, you know, the sucker punch, okay? Sucker and punch, both being confectionery type phrases. And then the illustration of the lollipop, but in the shape of a boxing glove. Really clever. The red vampiric cake looks so good, doesn't it? Yeah, very, very impressed with the illustrations on this one. Okay, how does the game go? But before I do show you how the game goes, I like it 2-player, and it is a very solid 2-player game. But I actually bought the solo version of this game. And it's called the Boss Bake Off. And Boss Bake Off is a 3-card solo expansion. And it turns the game into a very, very solid solo game. And so the way this works is you have a boss who is your opponent instead of a real life opponent. And you just you fight against him. You have a combat against him. He's the boss. And the way that it's his name is Gaius, and this time instead of going up against your co-worker, you're going up against your boss. All right, so he's really cool. You can see he's got 12 health where we have only 10. He's got a curse on the side of him which says ovens don't advance at the end of the turn. I will explain that in a minute. You remove 3 cards when you're playing solo, and then the boss brings in a dice mechanic here. Mechanism where for his turn, instead of like in a 2-player game, your opponent would use cards and use the actions and so forth to attack you. But with the solo version, the boss will you roll the dice and perform what the dice brings up like that. So very, very simple. But I really like it solo. The way you play your cards, the way you manage your actions is just as strategic as if you were playing against an opponent. So what do you do in this game? So you have to start with, on your turn, like I said, you deal yourself 2 cards. And I've got my Sucker Punch and Red Vampiric Cake. And you can do you can do 2 of 5 things, and you can do the same thing twice if you like. Okay, so the first thing you can do is you can draw another recipe card. You can have a maximum of 5 in your hand. And recipe cards are how you win the game, obviously, because the recipes, once they're baked and they come out of the oven, they become weapons that you can use to deal damage. So the first thing you can do is draw recipe cards. If I decided to do that, I'd just take the top card and put it here into my hand. The second thing, let's say I just picked one up and I drew the Sucker Punch. So I would have it in my hand. I can't use it yet, even though it says deal 1 damage and deal 4 damage. I can't use it yet. I have to bake it first. And then I've got to take it out of the oven at exactly the right time. So then it can be used as damage. Okay, so first thing you can do is draw a recipe card. The second thing you can do is actually put one of your recipes into the oven, right? So if I choose to do that, say on this turn, and I want to bake the Sucker Punch and prepare it as a weapon, all I do is to put it into the oven, I flip it over like that, and I put a token on the 0, right? So that's the timer of the oven. Okay, so now it's baking, and this is in front of me. It's now baking. But the key is, once it's flipped over like that, you might forget what recipe you have in that oven, which is why the third action there is to peek into an oven. If you've forgotten what you've got in there and what you're preparing for senseless violence, you need to spend an action to have a peek into it. You don't get to peek into it automatically. The fourth action you can do is turn up the heat, where you actually just move the counter up one at a time to cook the recipe. And the last action you can take is to actually take the recipe out of the oven and use it to deal damage. Okay, so you either draw a card, you put a recipe into the oven, you peek into the oven, you turn up the heat by moving the counter up the heat track, or you actually take a recipe out of the oven. Okay, so when do you take a recipe out of the oven? Okay, this is the critical thing, because when you do put a recipe in, please make note of these things on the card. When the counter is at 1, and if you took it out of the oven, you could use it to deal 1 damage. If the heat is at 5 and you took it out of the oven, you would be able to deal 4 damage. Okay, so the longer you leave it in there, the more damage you can do. That's really, really clever when it comes to this. You can have because if you're willing to push your luck a little bit and trust your memory and get to 5, and if your opponent doesn't hit you enough in those times, it's a nice little push your luck to say, oh, I might leave it in there for a little bit longer so I can get more damage. But you have to remember these numbers, 1 and 5, because once it's down like that, it becomes very difficult to remember. Now, especially if you've got more than one recipe sitting out here, okay? If I've got more than one recipe on the go, you think, okay, when do I have to take this one out of the oven, and when do I have to take this one out of the oven? Because a vampiric cake wants to come out at 4 and 6, right? So I love that memory aspect of this game. I don't normally like memory aspects in games, but this one works really nice. And of course, if you've forgotten, you can spend an action to peek in there and have a look. So if I took this out at 1, I would be able to deal damage. Look, I've even forgotten already. What was the second one? 5, okay? If I took it out at 5, it would deal even more damage. But if I took it out at the wrong time, like 3, if I thought, oh, I seem to remember 3 is the right time to take this recipe out, and I spent an action to take the recipe out of the oven, and it's not 3, and I've made a mistake, I have to discard that, and I take 1 damage. So it's not good if you mistake the time that you're supposed to take that recipe card out. That's very clever, and it takes up a lot of your mental energy trying to remember and time the cooking and the taking out of these recipes. And so if let's say I did get to 5 and spent an action and I took this one out of the oven, then I'd have this in my hand. And I can actually play this straight away if I want, or at any time, to cause the damage that it does, which is really, really great. Okay, and so this game is full of these recipes going into the oven and causing damage against your opponent. Like I said, after you have your turn, you take your 2 actions. In the solo version, Gaius, the boss, will have his turn. Oh, sorry, before I say that, at the end of your turn, normally, if you have a recipe in the oven or recipes in the oven, at the end of your turn, you have to move the heat up 1 for all of your recipes. You have to do that. Okay, so you can take that into your account when you're working out when to take the recipe out of the oven. At the end of your turn, every oven will go up 1. But in this particular version, in this solo version, see, Gaius has a curse. And on this guy, it says ovens don't advance at the end of the turn. So I won't be advancing ovens at the end of the turn like normal. This breaks that rule, okay? Which doesn't really help me, which means I've got to, because that's a really nice little free advance of your oven heat. But the curse here is saying I can't do that. Then for Gaius's turn, you just simply roll the dice and do what his action says. And that says player and minions take 2 damage. So for rolling a 2, I would have to take 2 damage on myself, okay? And he's hit me with whatever crazy sweet concoction that he's come up with. Then it would be back to me. What would I do? Would I take another recipe card? Would I put one of my recipes into the oven to be baking so I can cause a bit of damage? There's one other kind of recipe that you can cook, and these are called minions. You might have seen how on the 2 there, it says player and minions take damage. Well, some of these recipes turn into actual creatures that can also deal damage to Gaius while they're alive, and this ginger golem allows you to do that. So you put him in front of you, put a little marker on the I think once after you've baked him, actually, yeah, he has to go into the oven, and then you have to bake him first, and then he becomes something that you can that can help you deal more damage. So he's got his own little health track as well, and he will sit next to you as a helper. So those are really cool. And so we keep going like this until either I get down to 0 or Gaius gets down to 0, or if you're playing 2 players, your opponent gets down to 0. It's the same thing. If you're playing 2 players, he's got his health track here, and he's got his recipes in the ovens, and he's dealing damage to you. Let's have a look at some of the other recipes, because they're really good. Lava cake eruption. Okay, deal 1 damage and increase all ovens by 1 or 2 minutes. Or if you can hang out until 4, you can deal 2 damage and increase them by more. There's the quick bread. Look at these. Look at the illustrations. The quick bread, so clever. 2 extra actions for this one, which is really handy. This is cake fruit. You can restore energy with this one. This one is popcorn storm. Add 2 to all damage you deal that turn. The cheese quake. Look at that illustration. Amazing. So clever. Shuffle your opponent's ovens. Okay, you know, that if you're playing 2 players here, you can't play this with the solo game because Gaius doesn't have ovens and recipes. Imagine mixing up your opponent's oven so he doesn't know what he's got baking in which oven. He'd have to spend actions peeking into his oven. The sugar shuriken. Look at brownie bash. All right, and there's fantastic. I mean, there's obviously 16 different recipes. So this is how this game goes. Halfway through, you probably have a number of recipes baking in the oven at various heats like this. You have cards in your hand that you're thinking, oh, when should I put this into the oven? You might have these little golems helping you out on the side, and all of this is balanced to try and cause as much damage to him or your opponent as possible. I really like the solo game. I think I like the little curse it casts over the game. I like the fact that it removes some cards, so you don't know. So if you might not know which cards that something you're hoping to come up doesn't come up because it's been removed. It's random. I love having dice in games, so I like rolling. It makes it very easy to see what the AI actually does to you just by rolling dice. I know that's a very simple mechanism, but I don't mind rolling dice and just doing what it says. Uh, and then this idea of peeking into the oven because you've forgotten. So the memory aspect is incorporated very well. I like the two levels of heat gives you, and if you're willing to push your luck further and hang out a bit longer in the oven, you'll get a more devastating weapon against your opponent. There's another expansion which I bought as well called Mystery Ingredients, which you just get 3 more cards. Charcuterie, Omen Biscotti, which I take on Almond Biscotti, I guess, and the Pinata Bomb as well. So these are just 3 more recipes which can be thrown into the game if you can get that expansion. You do need a few counters, as you can see, and dice as well. But this is Arcane Bakery Clash, and I would recommend you giving this one a try. Okay, guys, see you later.